I'm Daryl Fox. I'm the Chief Content Officer at Nobly Learning Systems. I'm here with Charles Jurley, our VP of Product, right here, and Steve Smeads right over here, and we're all going to be slogging through this for the next 25 minutes, and happy to be here. And we're here because we're obviously very passionate about e-learning. It matters to us, it matters to the giant skills gap that we're all facing, and we're gonna dive in pretty deeply how we're going to address that. In the next 25 minutes, we're gonna, like I said, drill into that skills gap and give you some data. We're gonna blow through that quickly, and then we're gonna jump right into what you can actually do. Most companies, companies you work with, maybe even your own companies, are sitting on a lot of legacy content, no doubt, right now. And what you probably want to do is get it out of those binders and get it into a form that is interactive, that has some efficacy, that it's measurable, and that your learners will love, and you can actually understand what they're doing. I remember the first corporate training that I had, it was, wait a minute, what was it? Actually, I can't remember. It was so bad. I literally hit the space bar. It was a compliance course, actually. And there was a quiz asking me if I understood everything that I had read. I, of course, check yes. I never saw it again. That is exactly what we don't want to do. Actually, really interesting stat here. And I hate to read it, but I will. 83% of companies rate digital learning as urgent. That's probably not a surprise to anyone in here, but it is the deal. It's with us. Chief Learning Officer, if anybody belongs at an organization, they surveyed 1,500 executives at the larger corporations. They found 4 areas for fiscal 2018 that will have double-digit increases in spending. That's learning strategy, learning technology, better content delivery, and expanding their content libraries. More locally, at Middlesex University here, they surveyed 4,300 employees, all size companies. 3/4 of them felt like they did not have enough knowledge to advance to the next level. They didn't feel that they were that promotable, which of course results in enormous turnover. Big hit to the bottom line. In the US alone, turnover costs the US economy $30.5 billion. That's measurable. We owe these employees a lot better experience. We'll check in with Tim, who's from the UK office, a little bit later after we go through some of our learning methodologies, and we'll see what he learns. Great graphic, and all that you can, we'll send you these slides if you want them. Just ask us at the booth. Skills gap, totally global. You can find your country in here. Every, you know, whether it's a developed country, developing country, it's there. And here is what I like to look at and think about a lot, because it's already 2018 and we suddenly have this surge of millennials that need education. That's that bottom kind of purplish section. The Gen Xers are just above that in the green, and then blue, you can see the baby boomers. They have 1 foot out the door. Most of them are already gone. And as a total population, we are now educating millennials. That is who we're educating, and Charlie's gonna move in on that in just a second. The key takeaway, though, is that these groups, even though demographically look very, very different and they're in different numbers, they all need corporate training. It's really about what we know more than what we make now, and information economy requires that you learn a whole lot more and you learn it more often. So Charlie, why don't you dig into the millennials?
Good afternoon. Daryl wanted me to talk about the millennials because I am a millennial, and I'm part of that generation that is flooding your workforce right now. So let's start with a question. So why does anyone think this is relevant to talking about building engaging interactions? Why are we talking about data here? What do you think is the most important thing to millennials taking a job or staying at a job? So this is from a Gallup survey of over 30,000 millennials in the workforce. What they find as the most important reason to take a job and sustain that employment. Does anybody have any ideas about what they think the most important reason is? Wi-Fi? Haven't heard that one before. Because it's a job and they think it's interesting. The number one reason surveyed is the opportunity to learn and grow. So 59% of millennials, as compared to less than 35% of prior generations, cite this as the number one reason to take a job and stay in the current workforce. The expectation is now that a job is about purpose and no longer about payment. Beneath that, you see opportunity for advancement as number 2, work-life balance as number 3, and all the way at number 4, we see financial compensation. What's interesting about these first 4 is that for baby boomers and for Gen X, the rankings are completely reversed. So when you separate the demographic data, for baby boomers and Gen Xers, number 4 is number 1, and it goes up the ladder instead of down the ladder. So before we get into designing effective interactions and engaging learning materials, which is what we're going to talk about, part of this is understanding your audience. This is who you're teaching to now, as the majority of the workforce. Number 5 is health and lifestyle benefits. All right, so the second thing, before we get into methodologies and simple fixes, is to dispel certain notions about learning technologies. So the first thing is that there is no magic fix. Technology is not a panacea. I'm up here, I'm a technologist, I build technology, I'm here selling technology, but I want to level with you that just choosing the right software is not going to solve any of your problems. That is absolutely not true. The second thing is, because I see a lot of slides with goldfish on them, that's also not true. Human beings are not goldfishes. They don't have a 9-second attention span. That fact that gets cited over and over and over again is a Jacob Nielsen study from Stanford that was performed on consumers surrounded by distractors. The difference is, in a learning environment, when you're creating an engaging learning experience, the learner is developing a sense of trust. They are there to learn something. They're there to gain understanding. So there's a different set of expectations. So no, human beings are not goldfishes. You actually can keep their attention. The third thing that we want to dispel is that micro-learning does not mean that shorter is better. So simply breaking up content into smaller chunks does not make it more effective. Those results are very real, and anybody who knows this topic or selling you something on micro-learning should know that and should tell you that right off the bat. All right, so this brings up the question, how do we design an effective learning interaction? Well, we've broken this down into 4 easy steps. The first thing is to establish trust with the learner. So going back to that goldfish statistic, you have to create an expectation of understanding. The learner is there with a reason for engaging. They come to you because they want to learn something. As you've seen from millennials, the motivation already exists. So you have to utilize that trust. You have to articulate the fact that they are going to gain something from this. The second thing is to define value. Is this exercise a good use of my time? So this goes back to dispelling that myth of micro-learning. Micro-learning is useful and can be used well, but there must be clear definition around what value it provides to the learner, what they will gain from this. The third thing is to make things relevant. So when you're taking a learner through the learning pathway, always repeat whether or not the actions are relevant to the task at hand. Tie things back, incorporate them into your syllabus. So when you present them with an interaction or a point of interaction, it's always contacting back to the objective of the lesson. And the third thing, of course, is determine comprehension. So fourth thing, will my participation result in understanding? So this goes back to the learner not wanting to waste their time. And comprehension can be established not at the end of a learning module, but throughout. Keep testing the learner and tying the tests back to relevant tasks. We like to break up assessment and build it into interactions. so that when data or information is presented, it's also reassessed. All right. So this brings us to the challenge of designing actual points of interaction in a learning pathway. So when we start to talk about this, it seems immensely complicated. There are all these factors, including information architecture, user experience design, heuristics, that go into designing an effective interaction. But the truth is, it's actually not that complex. We can focus in on a few learning methodologies that have been around for a long time and apply those to your existing content that you already have in order to design an effective interaction. You don't have to start over. You don't have to, buy new technology in order to do all of this. You just have to apply certain methods. And so that's actually what Steve is going to talk to you about. He's going to walk you through a scenario that we've created, which some of us may have experienced before, that will give you tips and provide you with ways you can actually break down your content and address the learner so that they have effective interactions.
Click for me. Hi, everybody. Thanks, Charlie. So what we want to take everybody through today is a company that's faced with a certain problem, and they're trying to fix this problem for their employees, but they've really been struggling with it. So our company that we work for is We Sell Bees. We just came up with this because we think there needs to be more bees in the world, and if anyone can make that business model work, they're going to do very well for themselves. The problem they're trying to fix is this company provides free lunch to their employees, but they're having a lot of breakfast thefts. I don't know. I know we're about to go into lunch here. I don't know how many of you had a great breakfast, but we all know if you don't get that in the morning, you're slow, you're unproductive. The company really needs to solve this so they make their employees happy and productive. But they've really been struggling. They have a lot of existing content already. They've made a training video to help new employees know what breakfast etiquette should be. In the employee handbook, they have a guide on break room rules. They've also had an HR person come into employee onboarding to shake a stern finger at all their employees and say, don't steal other people's breakfast. However, none of it's working. The breakfast thefts are increasing. People are going crazy labeling their food in the refrigerator. It is completely out of hand. So they need to fix this problem. They need to find a better way to make this learning stick for their trainees. So we're going to look at a couple different strategies that they can take to actually make this content really sink in for their employees. So the first lesson strategy we're going to take is going to be identify and reinforce behavior. Now this strategy actually goes back to one of the first learning theories that was ever around called behaviorism. This just really came around in the 19th and 20th century. We're probably all used to this from elementary school. What this learning theory is really focused on is the change in observable behavior through negative and positive reinforcement. You can almost go all the way back to Pavlov's dog for this. You chime a bell, you get a reaction for them. So this is the most basic type of learning theory out there. So how can we apply this to a little more modern method? So what we're going to do is present a scenario to these employees. We're going to take that existing training video that was very flat, that was very static, was really putting people to sleep, and we're going to spice it up. We're going to put some annotations into this video. We're going to make some pop-ups occur. We're going to give them places while they're watching the video to be engaged with it and not just watching it and then wandering off to whatever else they want to do. And then in this video, we're also going to pop up some assessments to actually test how well they've captured this information. So we're going to build these assessments right into the video and see how they're doing. And this is where positive and negative reinforcement can really come into play. If the employee actually gets the assessment question right, we're going to go ahead and give them some positive reinforcement with some free pastries. They've gotten now a reward for that behavior. They're going to want to repeat it again. On the other hand, if they take the assessment and they don't do a good job, we're going to give them some negative reinforcements by taking those pastries away from them. This, again, kind of shames them with their coworkers. They're not getting that little freebie for them. They're like, I want to change my behavior, so next time I get the positive reinforcement. So this goes back to one of the most basic learning theories that we're all used to. I'm still the generation when my teacher rapped my hand with a ruler if I did something wrong, but we can use this in modern learning theory. And this is actually the approach most modern learning assessments take today, is from this simple model of positive and reinforcement behavior. Okay, so let's take a look at another strategy we can use with this content. This strategy we're calling build, retain, and recall. This really goes back to a learning theory called cognitivism. It came about in the 1960s and 1970s, and it's really studied on how the brain itself learns. It's really taking a scaffolding approach to your knowledge. So the approach is you take what the trainee already knows, and then you try to present some new information in a novel way that really sinks into their head and slowly build this scaffolding of knowledge up over time. This is what they actually use for like higher education textbooks. This is the approach they take to help people learn. So how can we use this in a more modern theory? So we're going to first of all build some new knowledge. We're going to review what they already know in the handbook, what we've always already taught them with the flat videos, but now we're going to take another approach. And we're going to actually build a little interactive that shows them other breakfast options that they can take advantage of so they don't have to sneak into the fridge and take their other employees' breakfast. So what we've done here is done a little map, showed them some little local options where they can go get their breakfast, actually has some information about what's available to them. So this is making this training relevant to them. They actually go, this is interesting to me. I might want to take advantage of this breakfast and go there. So this helps it go relevant, and it's actually building new information in their head. Now, another approach we need with this is also to have them recall and retain the information. So the way we want to retain it is present it to them in a way that's going to be sticky, in a way that's going to keep it in their head. So for this particular approach, we used a mnemonic device. We built a little interactive hotspot based on NEATO. And NEATO stands for Never Eat Another Trainee's Oatmeal. One more time. Really simple, NEATO, Never Eat Another Trainee's Oatmeal. So this is a good way to get this to stick in their head, get them to remember that. Now, it's not enough just to present them to this, because people forget things very quickly. They say even at presentations like this, you'll learn about 90% of what was presented within a week. So we've got to actually practice their recall with this and make sure it sticks. Practice makes perfect, right? So in this approach, we're actually going to build an interactive, once they've learned the mnemonic device, to actually test them on it. Make sure they can keep bringing it up at command. You do this a few times, and suddenly it's in their head. It's become part of their knowledge base. Stick with them. So this is another learning strategy we can take. Our third approach we're going to talk is solve a problem collaboratively. Now, this is an interesting learning theory called connectivism. This really goes, this is called constructivism. This really came around in the 1980s. And this is the first learning theory that goes away from the top-down approach. The first two learning theories are really based on an instructor standing in front of people, preaching to them, teaching them, and having that knowledge trickle down to them. Constructivism is really about the learner themselves building their knowledge themselves. So it's actually putting it on the student to actually learn for themselves. Not to be taught, but to build it for themselves. And this is a great way for them to really take it to heart and to really get it to stick. So the way we can actually solve a problem collaboratively is to challenge them, explore, and then make them present. So the first thing is to challenge them. We're not going to tell them the answers. We're going to give them the questions and let them go figure it out for themselves. So for this particular example, we can say, how can you avoid eating somebody else's breakfast? What options are there for you? And we can also say, well, what should we do as a company? What strategies are there for addressing those who do go into the break room and take another employee's breakfast? And then this puts this on them to learn. And they have to assemble this information from their environment, from their fellow employees, from other people. And the fun thing about this learning theory is we actually all use this all the time. This is really the modern workplace. And we don't tend to think of that as learning, but it really is. Unless you're really lucky, your company didn't come to you with a handbook and instructor and say, this is the way you're going to make your business successful. We all have to get together and figure it out on our own by answering this question. And this is what constructivism really is. So once we pose those questions, we leave it on the learner to go figure out the answers. And in this case, we want them to go explore it with some fellow employees. Maybe they have some senior employees there that can help tell them, what are your other options here? What's available to you? And as part of this, they actually want to build up their own interactives. They actually have some assessments. They build together their own questions, and they're assembling these answers to their own questions. And then the final part of this learning theory goes back to the old adage of you don't truly ever know anything until you can teach it to somebody else. So we put this on the learners to then go and present what they've learned to the rest of their peers through a presentation. In this particular example, they have to present to other trainees and actually show their own widget that they've built that shows different strategies for attaining breakfast. And this also bounces ideas off other employees. You get that good sharing, helps people think in a different way. And now that they've done the work themselves, they're going to walk away with that and keep that in their heads. This is a great approach. And the final strategy we're going to take is called participation and networking. This is the connectivism I talked about, and this is actually the first modern 21st century learning theory. This learning theory didn't really come around until the birth of the internet, because this theory is not based so much on what knowledge there is out there, but on learning itself. How do you keep constantly learning and improving? And this really speaks to something they call the shrinking half-life of knowledge, which is there's so much new knowledge being generated all the time, every day, that it's almost impossible to keep up with it. So what's more important is how you learn, how you go find what's relevant to out of the sea of data and make it important to you, make it sink in for you. So the approaches we take for this is a definition. So first we actually want to go research the web, see what other information is out there, what sources are available to you to answer these questions. So in this case we have a couple different sources that the learners found. They went on Yelp reviews, found out what other breakfast options are available for them. They looked up some articles that gave them some ideas of where they could take a breakfast, what other healthy options might be available in the option. They also found an article about what Elon Musk does for his employees and how he makes them healthy and keeps them happy at work with their breakfast. So they look at all these sources and then they find and sort what's relevant to them, what helps me answer this question. So once they have this definition, it's on them to iterate on them. It's not enough just to bring it in, but to actually learn it, to actually have it stick in your head, you need to iterate on it. So in this case, we asked them to put together a blog post or their own video training that they can actually use with their other employees. So this helps them actually put that information together in a new and novel way. Taking information that was already out there and assembling it, and that helps it really stick in their head. And then the final step of this is to actually comparison. So you take a look, what were the other sources out there? What is the other information that was generated from my other peers? And the nice thing about this, the most important thing about this theory, is then plugging this information you've generated back to the original source. In a way, you can think of an internet of all these different nodes of information. So you take from these nodes, but then you iterate and put new knowledge back out there. So you're improving the overall sources of knowledge out there in the world by using this learning theory. It helps you learn, but then helps the rest of the world learn as well. So that's why this learning theory is really interesting to me and a great way for the human race to move forward together. So with these different four approaches, it's a way to take existing content that was a little boring, wasn't really sticking, and have it something that really sticks with their employees. They walk away with a much better experience, and the company has much better productivity.
Thank you, Steve. So you probably remember Tim. We've cleaned him up. He's had 20 minutes of inspiring, deep learning through a couple of those methodologies, and you'll find as you think about them after this session that you don't need all four. You know, you might need one, you might need two, you might need a piece of one, but it is totally customizable to what you're doing. Well, here's what's happened. Since we've trained him, we have found that he is more productive. Company is more profitable. And a side benefit that's in the literature that was really interesting is customer service tends to go up significantly when customers are well trained. It seems really intuitive, but it's a really great side benefit. So to summarize, e-learning should be engaging, relevant, effective. Constant training is needed at all levels. Good news is that it can be achieved by adding the interactivity that we've been talking about. And here's Steve again for a quick quiz.
So just to put a little bit of practice what we preach in here, we just wanted to make sure how much of this presentation was actually retained. So question number one, can anybody tell me what NITO stands for? There we go. All right, one thing stuck. That's really good. All right, question number two, what is the number one thing millennials are looking for out of their workplace? Very good, very good. All right, and it's sticking in. The final question we'll just throw out there. What is one of the learning strategies you can take to help your employees really capture new knowledge? Just give me one of the four. Anyone? Anyone? All right, we might have to work on the retain and the recall on that one. Oh, we got one out there. Yep, there we go, there we go. So again, and we practice this over again, it'll sink in. You can use this in presentations, training, anywhere that you need to use it.
Okay, so just to prove that we practice what we preach, During this presentation, we defined that there is a problem that we all need to solve on a global level. So this is a challenge that we all face. So we established trust. The second thing is that we also said we were going to define simple methodologies for creating engaging learning experiences. So we've broken those down into 4 different methodologies that you can apply to your existing content. The third thing is that we are constantly tying this back to what this means. So in other words, it increases productivity, it improves customer satisfaction. It diminishes overall churn in terms of employees. And finally, Steve gave you a quiz, which you got 2 out of 3 on, which is good enough for us. So if you want to continue the conversation, please come see us at stand G4. Remember, if you scan your badge, we are giving away 2 Apple Watches today. So thank you for your time. If you want the slides or any of the research, we're happy to share it. Just contact us, and we'll send it along. Thank you.